Hey guys, time for part 2 of the December 28th, 2020 Q&A. So these won't be both out on the same day, but this all came from the same Q&A. It was just pretty long. I didn't have time to do both in the same video, but we are back. Okay, so let's see what we have here on this second part. Any certain game changers with limited ankle dorsiflexion with an impingement, stretching and band work seem futile, but not sure if it's just going to take a long while to retain it. Talus just does not want to mobilize. Any experience or remedies would be appreciated. Okay. Well, chances are, you're probably already doing any stretches that I would suggest, like anterior to posterior mobilization type of work. Off the top of my head, the only other thing I would really recommend that might help is you can look up talus taping. I do recall using that or having that suggested to a few clients and having a few people do it, and it was relatively effective. And I assume that a lot of it's just because you can actually tape it and make this, corrective adjustment stick, right, for a longer period of time. Whereas the stretching is kind of limited, and it's obviously going to move back to whatever position it was in. So yeah, if you stretch long enough and, repetitively enough, you could probably get it to work, get it to stick, as you said. But the taping might help, something that you could actually leave on, for like a longer period of time, and it might speed up the process of getting that adjustment to stick a little bit better. So yeah, I would check out talus taping. I'm sure there's probably, with the YouTube, right, you can just probably jump on there and find it pretty easily. Okay, looks like we backed out of the thread. Hold on, where are we at? All right. Oh, all right. Metal question. Do you think the Swedish outfit Candlemas, probably a different language, were the forefathers of doom metal with their release of Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus, which literally translate to first epic doom metal in Latin, circa 1986, incidentally, or can we look to Black Sabbath for seed being planted for this glorious genre? That's an interesting perspective. Black Sabbath as doom metal. Yeah, any genre evolves, right? So we can't expect 1986 to be the same as 2020 or whatever. And that's why I think sometimes there's so many new genres created, is because they just sound changes. So like, well, I really don't know what this is. It's not the same, so we need a different genre. But that's an interesting perspective. I've never actually heard of Candlemas or whatever, however you say it. But I'm going to have to look it up now. Obviously, I've heard of Black Sabbath. And I guess in order to make an educated decision here, I would need to listen to the other band, because I really just don't know them that well. So I guess I'll have to do that first and revisit this one. Okay. All right. Let's see. Back over to Instagram. Thoughts? Wait, no, wrong. We're out of order here. Let's see. Thoughts on keeping estro high-ish on cycle. Benefits, cons, directly talking about health markers and gaining ability. So I'm assuming they're talking about a muscle growth, hypertrophy situation. So benefits, well, I mean, collagen content and connective tissue, also nutrient partitioning, just overall gaining muscle mass, right? Now, high-ish is, here's the thing, we're trying to get the maximum amount of benefit with no side effects. So really the idea is have as much estrogen as you can without side effect, right? So we don't really know what that number is because it's going to be based on a few things. It'll be based on person, genetic, genetic predisposition to side effects, I guess. Also, how that estrogen binds within the individual, and also what their androgen level is too, or what the androgen composition is as well, right? So, but yeah, I mean, that's the idea is to have it as high as you can without a side effect. So, right. Health markers, I mean, you wouldn't really see any negative. I mean, you would see some positive, as I mentioned, really see any negative on health markers, not directly, no. But yeah, it would certainly help you with gaining ability, assuming you weren't pushing into the realm or ratio of too much. So I hope that kind of covers that one. Are free meals on a weekly basis a good tactic for increased calories compared to more food in the off season? Okay, so like instead of just increasing the base plan, use a free meal for a calorie spike. Well, here, here's the thing is that we have to look at like how much. We can look at a time frame. We could view the calories kind of in a weekly total type of scenario, and just and we could kind of add the free meal in to boost that total. But how much food are we really going to process at one time towards that accruing new muscle mass or growing muscle mass, right? I'm going to probably base that on a few things. How much are they eating on a weekly basis? So if their daily total is not that high, like it's pretty manageable, yeah, I mean, we could still do a free meal every week, but I'm like not going to put a ton of emphasis on, we have to get a lot in these spike meals to help keep overall calorie intake up. It's just not like that big of a priority because we can easily just increase daily intake. Now, if daily intake is already very high and difficult, then yeah, it could be a decent tactic to spike overall calorie intake without needing to increase calories on the base plan all the time. We have to think to like, what are we consuming in the free meal? When are we consuming it? If it's a super high calorically dense meal, is it causing a huge inflammation response? Is it going to like ruin the whole rest of our day of meals? We may need to position it as the last meal of the day type of thing, right? Definitely not before training or something like that. But yeah, I'd say those two things that I mentioned, those two like scenarios would kind of dictate if that is a good strategy or not. But I mean, I definitely do that with people for that purpose if it's kind of going to be beneficial. There's even been a few cases where I do like free day, which is not very common. Don't email me and to sign up because you're going to want a free day. But but yeah, it definitely could have its place. I mean, and sometimes like calorie intake gets so damn high that unless you're like consciously forcing yourself to have extra calories during the free meal, you're not really going to overconsume calories anyhow. So that you're just not tracking, doesn't mean you're eating anymore. You're just not tracking. So yeah. How do you advise perimenopausal women to train and eat? Okay. It wouldn't be a whole lot different. A couple things we're going to want to consider. So, depending on how much of a hormonal transition has happened, kind of where they are at in that process, recovery ability might be a little bit different, right? Especially with some of these kind of sex hormones dropping in the tank. They may be they may be experiencing some lack of recovery. Just really depends on where they are at in the process. So that would probably be one of the main things to consider with training. Also, one thing that I tend to see is that, well, it's not just me, this is what actually happens. We see that the ovarian hormone function goes down. The adrenal glands are going to be more responsible for these hormone pathways. So the adrenal glands, as we know, are also handling most of our stress hormones. Now, adrenal glands aren't that big. We're just taxing something that's very, very small and already has a large workload, if you will, when it's getting shifted over. Some of that responsibility is getting shifted over. So probably the amount of total stress load that you put on yourself from training is probably going to be even more important. Again, recovery, it's kind of the same thing, I guess, but you would want to consider that. Eating, if you really wanted to get nitpicky with it, there might be a slight difference in how your body utilizes energy substrates, like carbs and fat. I've even seen some literature suggest a higher protein actually works for older women a little bit better. But at the end of the day, I'm mostly going to base that stuff on the results they're getting and how they feel with those, with that intake. Like that's always going to dictate what I'm looking at, because chances are the better they feel, the better they're going to, better results that they're going to have. Can't talk. But yeah, hopefully that's somewhat helpful. All right, thoughts on injectable L-Carnitine, benefits, dosage, and timing. Well, injectable, better bioavailability. If you're looking for primarily fat transport, that's really what you're getting out of it. It's not like a fat burner, but it puts the fat in a better position to be burned, I guess, if you want to be a good way to explain it. Dosage, there's different dosage schemes I've seen. One of the popular ones would be like about 200 milligrams per 50 or so pounds of lean body mass. Now, the one caveat there is age. You're probably gonna get more benefit out of this if your intramuscular or your total body carnitine stores are more depleted. And from everything I've seen, this generally happens as someone ages, and that would also explain why I normally see the older someone is, the more benefit they get from carnitine. Whereas some of these younger people, I don't really see them get anything from injectable carnitine at really any dose. Okay, so again, with a little more age, you might get a little more benefit. Do you need to go way over those dosing recommendations? No, not really, because again, probably won't yield any extra benefit. But that's kind of a general dosing recommendations. And timing, I personally don't think it matters a ton, because really what we're trying to do is saturate those carnitine stores. And I think once we've done that, we're going to get the benefit. Now, if you wanted to do it around activity, that may make the most sense considering the action of the carnitine itself. So yeah, you could do it pre-cardio, pre-weight training, pre-whatever, pre-whatever is going to basically utilize that energy substrate. So cardio might be a little bit better than weight training, because the cardio, if it's like a little bit lower intensity cardio, might be a little more fatty acid intensive and use that fuel. So yeah, but again, I think that's kind of splitting hairs considering just the overall like saturation that we're looking for. Okie dokie. A little bit more. Lockout on leg press. I'm not sure if they mean like locking your knees type of lockout, or like in a 3/4 rep kind of that time under tension exaggeration. I mean, you can pretty much train full range of motion without like slamming your joint into lockout. So without that like slight hyperextension of the knee at the very end, kind of where it looks like your leg's gonna buckle. But yeah, you can pretty much go all the way up to full flexion and just not slam it into the joint, and you're not stacking the joint, you're still keeping tension on the muscle. That's kind of where you want to go. You don't need to like do a super short range of motion just for tension. You can still do a full range. Okay. Extreme fatigue and exhaustion, paralyzing type. Scary as I cannot function, but mind is still running, causes anxiety, and it's so bad I wake up dreading the moment it hits. I feel so helpless, and it prevents me from doing things. And this is with enough food and sleep. Well, I don't know much about you, so sounds like a pretty serious issue. I would hate to give you any type of like really concrete feedback on something like this, but extreme fatigue could be caused from a lot of things. I mean, you could have some type of immune issue going on. You could have some type of heavy metal, issue going on. Some type of autoimmune issue going on. You could have, what's your past history like? You know what I mean? So just because you're getting enough food and sleep now, how much stress has your body been through over a long period of time? Are your hormones tanked? Do you have adrenal insufficiency? Do you have we'd have to know what is causing that extreme fatigue. Because just because you're eating enough now, it just still sounds like you're very, very stressed. If there's causes anxiety, then you're constantly dumping stress hormone, right? That's constantly an anxiety, or that's constantly a stress response. So there's still a lot of stress there, but that's a super broad statement without really knowing any context. But this person, feel free to reach out via email. My email is in my bio on my Instagram and Facebook, and I'd be happy to do a consultation. I'd really have to exhaust some different options or different avenues there to kind of know what to look at. Why am I more hungry on a bulking phase, 2,500 calories, than on a fat loss phase of 1,700 calories? Well, it's again, I don't really know much about you, so I really know how 1,700 calories, I don't know if that's low relative to what your metabolic rate is and what your activity level is and your body mass and those things. But generally when this type of thing happens, it's because there was a large amount of metabolic downregulation during the deficit, and as coming out of that, a lot of that's coming back up, and you get very, very hungry. And it's also a way for your body the hunger signals get pretty tricky, because it's also a way for your body to help you basically store fat. It's hey, we're getting fed, we need fat, we've been restricted, we need to fill fat cells, we don't want to do that again. Make this person extra hungry, deceivingly hungry, to the point where you just ate but you're hungry, right? You know what I mean? So that's really it's really more of a metabolic adaptation, and maybe possibly a defense mechanism there. We actually had on the OPD podcast recently, we just did a whole post-show episode, which this might not be post-show, but it would definitely pertain to that. And we talked about kind of those scenarios and why you feel the way you do in these reversing or calorie increasing scenarios. All right, last one. Hey Austin, if someone will use GH during a fat loss phase, which is the best way to use it? Do you recommend on just training days to preserve insulin sensitivity, or best to add it on non-training days too? This is probably one, honestly, it's probably been answered about 900 million times on Q&As. You probably just go back to my YouTube and search it, but we'll answer it anyhow. So really simple terms, Fat loss, you need to be fasted. You need a baseline insulin state. You want to use it. You want to mobilize free fatty acids. That's really the point of using it. So fasted in the morning, easiest way. Really, you don't need more than maybe a couple IUs, and that will fully mobilize those fatty acids. And then as far as like days, well, you shouldn't really be having any issues with insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity issues in a fat loss phase. Maybe like right at the beginning, if you're coming out of like a harsh growth phase where you're not sensitive yet. But beyond that, you shouldn't really be having those issues, so you should be able to take it daily. That shouldn't be a determining factor. But yeah. All right, that is part 2, and talk to you guys next time.